what are Stephanie Gray's thoughts on embryonic adoption for embryos that are currently frozen from IVF operations?
Great question.
It is.
Okay, so I wrestle with this. I have a different book I've written, Conceived by Science, thinking carefully and compassionately about infertility and IVF. And in the book, I actually address the question of embryo adoption only as an appendix, intentionally. I didn't exclude it entirely because I knew if I make the case against IVF and the manufacturing of humans in a lab as opposed to the reception of another individual through sexual intimacy, that inevitably people will say, okay, once been there, done that, embryos created, is it ethical to adopt or not? And so I thought I have to speak to this, but I wanted my book to be timeless in that I wanted the main message of IVF being wrong to be accepted and used over time. And I think the question of whether it's ethical or not to adopt embryos is something we're trying to figure out as a society, but more specifically as people of goodwill and in the realm of, a Judeo-Christian worldview. And so I included an appendix that actually still doesn't come to a conclusion. And I make the arguments for and against it. So I think one argument that can be made for why it seems reasonable to pursue embryo adoption is that the sin of manufacturing a human outside of sexual intimacy is over. The human already exists, just like creating a human through rape or creating a human through a hookup. That's over. Now we've conceived new life. What do we do? And so one could argue that with frozen embryos, their parents made them unethically, but now that they exist, shouldn't we rescue them? And then another argument in favor of rescuing would be, look, in fact, I was talking to your wife today about how, was it Liam, that a number of her Catholic friends were essentially wet nurses for at various times?
Peter, I think. Yeah,
or was it Peter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When Cam wasn't able to breastfeed or produce enough at times. And so different friends actually not just gave milk, but like latched
him around the circle.
Yeah. So, someone would say, well, look, that was a born child who had a need for sustenance and someone was willing to use their body to support him. So isn't embryo adoption like a preborn child needing the sustenance of a uterus and someone offering their body to do that? So then the rebuttal would be the difference is when, if someone were to feed my baby, they're still able to feed their baby. Whereas if someone were to allow their uterus to be occupied by an embryo, they're closing their uterus off for more than 9 months from being occupied by their own child. So therefore, what responsibility does a couple have to be open to receiving new life in their own womb? And can they prioritize filling the womb with someone else's child as opposed to their own? The other concern, so then someone might say, okay, well then only infertile couples would be candidates for embryo adoption. And then some people would say, well, the whole reason they're infertile is it would be hard to implant the embryo. So maybe that would only work if you had a couple where it was the issue on the man's part, he has 0 sperm count, but the woman's body is capable of gestating an embryo. And that this would be not ordinary care, but extraordinary care to allow your body to be used by someone else. So there wouldn't be a mandate that we must do this. But so all that to say, I struggle with where to land because I wouldn't want in any way to validate the creation and manufacturing of life in a lab. And so, or as well, get to a situation where if we're only supposed to come into existence through sexual intimacy, then that means, morally speaking, it should never be possible for someone else's child to be in my body because that could never happen through sexual intimacy. So therefore, is it okay for me to put someone else's child in my body when that should only happen through sexual intimacy and therefore, could. So I've analogized to this situation where imagine someone has created a bunch of babies in labs with the intention of but making them so that they don't have kidneys, and then creating kidneys, and then intending once these embryos make it to birth in a machine that they would then get kidneys put into them. Well, imagine the people who do this have been able to make the embryos, but not the kidneys. So then they have a lab full of embryos in machines that need kidneys, but don't yet have the ability to lab make kidneys. And imagine the lab is raided and police are like, oh my gosh, you're manufacturing disabled human beings who need kidneys. We're going to shut this lab down. Meanwhile, we have, let's say, 200 humans that are in machines that need kidneys. There are no, let's say, kidneys that exist other than the kidneys in other babies' bodies. Is it ethical for parents to take, like if I took a kidney from my 2-year-old to try to help these children, or would we say, you know what, your 2-year-old has a right to their kidneys. They can't yet decide whether they want to donate a kidney. So we really don't have kidneys to give to these other children and they die. It's not that I'm saying these lab-made humans aren't valuable or equal to the rest of us. I'm just saying there isn't an ethical way to keep them alive, so sadly they die. And so the people who would be pro-life but opposed to embryo adoption still think those embryos are valuable humans that are equal to us. But like the lab-made humans in my analogy, we might say there is no ethical way to keep them alive, so sadly they will die, but they shouldn't have been created this way to begin with, and that's what we need to focus on. So I know that's not probably the most clear, this is my position, but this is how ethically complex it is, which always happens when we go down an immoral path.
I got to tell you guys about my new favorite app. It's called Ascension, and it's by Ascension Press. This is the #1 Bible study app, in my opinion. And you can go to ascensionpress.com/Fradd. Go there, and so that way they know that we sent you. It is absolutely fantastic. It has the entire Bible there, very well laid out. The whole Bible is read to you by Father Mike Schmitz, or just sections of the Bible. It has the catechism there. It's cross-referenced absolutely beautifully. It's really actually quite difficult to explain to you how good this is. Just download it and check it out for yourself. It even has over 1,600 frequently asked questions about Scripture. So if you go to Genesis 1, you might have a question about evolution. Well, there's a drop down right there. You can read an article that'll help you understand it. I went through it with the guys at Ascension the other day, and my jaw was just, it was dropped. It was absolutely amazing. It's had tens of thousands of 5-star reviews. Again, go to ascensionpress.com/Fradd. It also has all of their amazing Bible studies. So I remember back in the day, I had a big DVD case of Jeff Caven's Bible studies. Well, it's all there on the app. So go download it right now. Please go to ascensionpress.com/Fradd.